Can you? I've just got the. We've just gone.
There it goes. Okay.
Just gone live.
Well, we'll do it again. Good morning, everybody. It's Thursday, January. I swear I hit it earlier. I said it going. We've been talking to you guys, and you weren't there. You weren't listening. That's how we feel. We're hurt. I'm hurt. Dejected. Anyway, sorry about that. Technical difficulties. We're now.
You know who I blame, don't you?
Matt. You know,
Mapping.
It's naturally his fault. What he did was he was using the Jedi Mind Force on me, the Vulcan mind trick. I don't know, one of those things, and it melted my brain. Good morning, everybody. This is Tracey Benefield. She's from American Atheist and from the Atheist Community of Lubbock. She's been gracious enough to be our guest. And, of course, you know, the guest host today, the wonderful Super Chris, the other Super Chris. No, I'm Super Chris. He just Chris.
you can be Super Chris so long as I'm the best Chris. That's fine.
As you wish. See, that's awesome. Wonderful. So good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for reals this time.
Yes.
I was actually giving a shout out to everybody whenever I was told we're not really there. So good morning, Jay. Everybody, CC. Nerdy Rodent's here. Nerdy Rodent is here. Good morning, Nerdy Rodent. Criminal Birds. Atheist. Dave. Everybody, hi. Sorry, I already shouted you out. You just weren't watching. So there we go. Thank you, Chris, for letting me know that we were not streaming. My hero.
That's okay. Well, you know the worst thing is I made a corny joke thinking we were live, and now I'm not sure if it'll have the same effect if I actually make it again.
Well, you can go ahead and tell us about how hot it is.
Oh yeah, well, so as I was saying before we went live, so we had a couple of weeks ago. Everyone knows, you know, the bushfire. Well, last few months we've had the bushfires raging pretty hot here. Last week we had heaps of rain, which was the good news, and you know, we got floods, of course, out of that. And I think yesterday I was saying that it was a nice day, the weather was wonderful, it's all looking good. And to give you all an idea, it's midnight. It's just after midnight here, and it's slightly over 100 degrees where I am. So we had 45 degrees Celsius today, which is around about, I think it's 115 on the on that funny Fahrenheit scale that you guys have, with high winds, of course. That gave us a dust storm. So yeah, anyone who wants to tell me that climate change isn't happening, I'm going to slap them. I'm going to slap them really, really hard.
Well, that's good to hear from somebody on the right. Well, even though it's the right of, that's cool. Yeah.
The centre right. I mean, I'm
centre right. Yeah, no, I know.
I'm not a crazy. But,
well, I wouldn't go that far. I don't know who told you that.
I tell myself that. It makes me feel better. I often do it when I have conversations with myself. So.
Yeah, just self-soothing. I'm not crazy.
I'm not mad. The voice in my head told me so. No, it's good. I got rid of the voice in my head years ago when I got out of Christianity.
Did you?
I don't voice in my head anymore.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm taking up all the time here. No one really wants. They've heard me all week. How are you, Tracy?
I'm doing pretty good. It's not too early here. It's about 7 a.m. So
fantastic. Yeah. And Texas, everything's bigger in Texas. And I was saying to you before in the pre-show, apparently they say that Texas and Australia were very similar. The people are similar. So obviously Texans are very good people.
Yes, absolutely. And we were just talking about Australia the other day and how we consider Australians to be Texans. So you're an honorary Texan.
I've said that. Have I not said that? I've said that. That Australians are the Texans that went that way.
So does that mean I've got to change my football team?
No.
No.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. He's a New England fan.
Oh.
I know, right? I
don't know about that.
Being like somebody from one of the colonies that, well, of course, it hasn't quite broken away. They never broke away like we did. They never had the to break away. Anyway, so I can understand why he would bow to the crown. Carry on. Sorry.
Let's save the Queen and
Patriots.
All that. No, I just like Tom Brady. What can I say? So I might be looking for a new team next year if he goes. But so,
speaking of that, did you hear? I'm sorry. Did you hear that Aaron Rodgers came out as an atheist? Or
yes,
I did see that.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Especially with his profile. Well, I think it's important for people who are atheist and of high profile to come out and declare their lack of faith, because it helps normalize it. And I guess it makes it, there's probably a lot of atheists or young atheists who are out there and are closeted, for lack of a better term, who are struggling to get out. And when they see someone like an Aaron Rodgers who's brave enough to sort of come out and on a very public stage where he will cop criticism for it and say, I'm an atheist, and then defend his lack of belief.
Right.
How good's that?
Yeah. Well, one of the things is I've heard that I guess Danica Patrick is Christian. So what I've seen is his deal is, how can you, speaking to her, believe in this stuff? And so in other words, his coming out may cost him Danica Patrick.
Maybe. Although you would imagine they've already had the conversation.
You would think by now. Yeah.
So you never know. I guess they'll all be praying for his soul. I'm sure that Kanye West will be out there preaching.
Yeah. Painting himself silver or something.
So, Michelle, so you're the assistant director for Texas for American Atheist. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I've been the Texas assistant state director for about 3 years.
Okay. And you run it's the Atheist Community of Lubbock. So obviously Lubbock is in Texas. Give us a bit of an idea. So where's Lubbock for someone who's on the other side of the world like me? Sell me on Lubbock.
Lubbock is in North Texas, but we call it West Texas. But Lubbock is basically a hub for all of the other smaller farming communities around us. When people ask us what's the nearest biggest city, well, we are the big city. Even though we're a fairly small town, we are about 200,000 to 300,000 in size. But I like to call us a concentrated city. We have just about everything that a big city like Dallas or Austin would have, but we have maybe one of them instead of multiples. And so we have lots of museums. We have lots of culture. We have Texas Tech is our college that's here. So we're a pretty unique little town in that we serve a much larger area, even though technically we're pretty small.
And looking on the map, the one thing that, because I'd heard the name Lubbock, I believe that, is it Buddy Holly's from Lubbock? Is that right?
Buddy Holly is from Lubbock. Yes, we have a Buddy Holly museum here.
Oh, there you go. See, you learn something new every day. But when I looked at the map, something that popped up is you guys look like even though it's a different state, you're close to Roswell there.
Yeah, we are very close to New Mexico. Yeah.
No sightings of nothing funny flying in the sky, or
actually the Lubbock lights. There is something back, I think in the 1950s or 60s. There was a sighting that's really famous called the Lubbock lights.
Well, there you go. See, another thing I've learned today. So that's always a good thing. So how did you, how did you come about being involved with American Atheists and the Atheist Community of Lubbock?
So it was really funny. The Lubbock community here started as just kind of a social group of a bunch of atheists getting together once a week to complain about Christians. And one day we had the state director from New Mexico. She came to visit, and she was there when we were all kind of talking about how we wish that there was a more active group for atheists and we want to do more activism. And she just told us, well, just be that group then. You don't have to wait for somebody to do it. And she pointed to me and she goes, you're going to be in charge and you make it happen. So I'm in charge and I'm making it happen.
Excellent. So I know, and I guess a lot of us are familiar with the Atheist Community of Austin, and they often talk about how Austin's a bit of an anomaly in Texas, where it's sort of like a bit of a liberal hub where it's okay to be an atheist, and that the rest of Texas is very conservative Christian. How is that the case with Lubbock as well, or how is Lubbock as a town?
Lubbock is a little bit mysterious. So when you look at the last religious census that was done in 2010, 42.4% of Lubbock citizens identify their religion as none. And so it's a much higher percentage than the rest of Texas. And so I think the state averages around somewhere between 18 and 20% are atheists or non-religious. So Lubbock is a high percentage, but we also are a college town. And so that will draw a lot of liberal folks out. Lubbock, it seems to be, when you're here, that it's very Christian conservative, but really we just think that all of the atheists are hiding. And so we're trying to draw them out. We're trying to, build up this community that's really public, so that people know that it's okay, that people know that they can come out, that, we're not going to hurt anybody. We're not going to scare anybody. We don't want to take anybody's religion. We just want to make it a safe atmosphere, safe environment for these atheists that we know are here that are just kind of hiding and doing their own thing and aren't really part of the community yet.
So one thing I guess looking at my research, going through my research today, I noticed about 12 months ago, you actually gave an invocation at the Lubbock City Council. So I guess that's where religious leaders can come in and offer a prayer. And obviously you didn't offer a prayer, but can you I guess first of all give us a bit of background into how that came about and I guess the process and any difficulties you might have come across?
Yeah, so the invocation was really amazing. When we first thought about it, we had just sort of gotten our stuff together. We were trying to become a charity, and we wanted to put our name out there. We wanted people to know that we existed here in Lubbock, and we were brainstorming about the best ways to do that. And so one of our members had the idea to give an invocation at Lubbock City Hall. And we'd heard of this happening in other places around the U.S. And this is something American Atheist, has some resources for us and gave us a lot of help on how to formulate an invocation and what to do if you get a lot of pushback. So we had a lot of support there. So when we went into it, we expected a lot of pushback because that's what everybody else had been getting. But really, we didn't get much pushback at all. We had a little trouble tracking down the right person to get in contact with. But once we got in contact with them, we just asked if we could give the invocation, and it was as simple as scheduling it. And we got on the schedule, and the news broke a few months later in November that we were going to give it. We didn't go out seeking that, but a reporter found out about it. And there was a lot of talk beforehand about people were asking, what is an atheist? How are they going to give an invocation? And what we found was that people weren't really hateful. They were just curious and they didn't understand. And so that was something unique that I found for Lubbock, was that we expected a lot of hateful comments. We expected a lot of proselytizing, that kind of thing, but we didn't really find that. We found a lot of people just were genuinely curious about how this was even going to happen. And then, the mayor even went on the news and talked about it a little bit and said he didn't understand it either, but he recognized that my free speech was protected. And so, it was much friendlier than we had anticipated. Okay. And then once I actually gave the invocation, we expected protests, and we expected them to even walk out. There had been rumors about the city council members walking out, but none of that happened. And so it ended up being a really positive thing for both us and for the larger Lubbock community.
Okay, and I guess 12 months on, what was the flow and effect of that? Obviously it raised a bit of interest and probably some awareness for the community. Did you see an increase in membership? Did you see a lot of people, I guess, more openly stopping to talk and ask questions? What was the flow and effect?
Yeah, that we saw a huge increase in our membership. So I think before that we had maybe about 50 members, and then after we had raised it to maybe about 75 members within the next few weeks. And then now a year later, we're at about 200 members. So we definitely have been more noticed, but the invocation was just kind of the start. That was the first thing that we did in the year. But we've been doing things all year long to put our name out there and to get more recognized. And it's been a really amazing experience.
So from what I can see, I guess we'll just call it ACL for short. Is that okay? That's Yep.
Yes.
Does a lot of work in the community. So yes, I guess what's the thought behind that apart from the obvious? I guess wanting to help people. What's driven that in particular?
Well, it's been pretty strategic. So we want to help people. That was always something that we had planned on, was being a charity in Lubbock and being a resource for people who are non-religious, because almost every single charity here is religious based. So if you are down on hard times, if you have trouble paying rent, if you need assistance with anything, you have to go to either a church or an organization that is religious based to get any kind of help. And so that's always something that we wanted to do. But really, it serves several other purposes. So being active in the community, for one, it allows people who are religious to see that we're not dangerous, and to see that we can be functional members of the community, and that we're not here to just take away religion. That's not what we are aimed for. So it's about destigmatizing what it means to be an atheist, and creating conversations with other groups of people, and making it safe for them so that they feel like they can come and ask us questions, and that's not scary and dangerous. So it serves that purpose. But then it also gives the members of our community, our non-believers, a sense of purpose and somewhere to go and volunteer. It makes them feel good about themselves to be able to have that, because otherwise they'd have to go and volunteer in these more religious organizations where they might have to hide who they are or what they believe in order to be able to help. So we're giving them that outlet to be able to help people in their community without having to hide who they are as a person.
So as far as I guess challenges, what challenges, because look, this is obviously something that you've set up from scratch.
Yes.
What challenges have you found along the way? Or I guess, what advice would you give to other people who are in a community and maybe thinking about doing something similar? What challenges can they expect, and I guess, how did you overcome some of those challenges?
One of the biggest challenges is just that when you first start out, you're going to set up things and people aren't going to come, and you're going to set up community engagement things. You're going to go and feed the homeless. You're going to go and have game nights and social events, and people won't show up, and you'll be sitting there by yourself, and that's incredibly difficult, and it can be disheartening. But what we have found over the last year or so of doing this is consistency is key. Even though people won't show up that time, if they see that it's happening regularly and that you're not giving up, more people will start to show up, and you will start to grow the community. So it's about being patient and having persistence.
And I guess obviously I'm once again not too sure on the distances. I could see where things were on the map. How close are you to, say, Austin, for instance?
Austin is probably about a 4 to 5 hour drive, I'd say, somewhere around there.
Not overly. So, as far as engagement with other atheist communities within Texas, how are you working with other atheist communities, and is there any resources being shared, or I guess, how are you enriching each other?
So I mostly focus on the groups here in North Texas. Lubbock is by far the biggest group, but there's also groups in smaller cities like in Amarillo to the north of us, Abilene to the south of us. So we try to partner with them when we can. During Pride is usually the time that I, as a assistant state director, travel the most. And so when the Pride festivals are happening in these different cities, I'll go and help them set things up and help them get a booth started. And we try to invite as many communities as we can to our events, especially if they're smaller. And so reaching out and trying to just say, hey, I have this going on. Is there anything that you guys can add to it, or is there anything that I can help with in your city, is always really great. And also keeping those lines of communication open, using any avenue that you can to communicate with the leaders in these different cities. So getting familiar too with who the leaders are and who you can turn to for resources, so that if somebody comes and asks you, hey, I need this, then you know who to refer them to. So there's Susan in Dallas, who is doing a lot of activism things. So if anybody's closer to her, I refer them to her. There's Judy in Houston, who's doing a lot of things with trying to get together a conference of atheists and atheist organizations from all across Texas. So he's doing a lot to try to connect the different Texas cities. And so we're trying to build this larger community that is more connected, because we can't really effectively promote atheist issues and vote. For instance, we can't move our voters in one direction if we're not even all connected. And so that's something that not just the Texas state directors, but all of the state directors from all over the U.S. with American Atheists are trying to do.
Okay. So starting out, so I guess what advice would you give to someone who's, say, sitting watching this right now, who's in a community, they don't have an active atheist community around them that they're aware of? How would you suggest, what are the first steps that people should take? And sorry, it's that, I guess for those who are in the audience, prior to the show, one of the things Tracey mentioned was she's got a passion for communities and setting up communities. So I said, oh, good, I'll be digging right into that. So anyone who is in the chat, if you do have any questions as well, pop them in. And the other Chris, Super Chris, is he's keeping an eye on things, and he'll pop them up if there's anything we need to ask that I missed. So please do get involved in the conversation and definitely do engage. But sorry, back to you, Tracey.
So I think that the one thing that we have to keep in mind, especially with atheists, is that atheists don't really want to join anything, and that's a really big hurdle to try to overcome. Is they're not big joiners, but the way that we get them to join things is by kind of shifting our focus on what we're looking at. So most of the atheists who are moved to do something are usually involved in activism. But activism, while that is important and has a place in the community, it's not the first thing to focus on. It's not what's going to bring people together. What brings people together is camaraderie and friendship and having relationships with other people. So you have to build that first. You have to start with, if you're starting with a Facebook community like we did, you have to start by posting things in your Facebook group that are funny or engaging, or finding ways to engage with people online first so they feel comfortable and they feel like they're getting to know you. One of the things that we do is Meme Monday, and on every Monday people post they save up all of their favorite atheist memes, and on Monday they all post them, and it's really funny, and it gets people engaged. And most of the time we find that a new member will engage with us online first for several months before they get up the courage to come out to an actual event. So that's why having regular meetings, having regular events every month is important. Right now, what we do is we have about 5 different events every month that are regularly occurring. And have them, different days of the week, have them with different activities, because people will have a different comfort level as to what kind of activity they're willing to engage with you in. So one day of the month we have Taco Tuesday, and we go out to a taco place and we just eat tacos. That's all we do, is we eat tacos and talk. Another night of the month is a discussion night where people can come and engage on relevant atheist topics. So that might be something that someone else is more likely to come to than Taco Tuesday. And then another night we have a bar night, and we all go out and we go drinking. And then another night we have game night. Yeah, so we have a variety of different things that people can do. So keeping those regular things, and you don't have to do all of those. You can start with just one regular event a month that people can come to. But being patient and engaging with people and building communities is the way that you're going to get people to be more active. You have to give people a reason to want to fight for one another. So that means you have to build those relationships up and make people care about one another.
So as far as, I guess, your interactions with the local religious community, have you, and from the sounds of it, it sounds like you're probably in a particularly good city in Texas, but have you had any challenges as far as engagement with the religious community?
We actually haven't had too much negative engagement with the religious community. There's been some, but for the most part, it's been pretty positive. We've had, after I did the invocation, for instance, I had a lot of people, a lot of pastors email me and tell me that they were really happy to see some inclusivity. And we did a No Strings Attached homeless outreach event recently too. And after that, we also received a lot of support from the religious community. But we have received, some backlash, but not really a whole lot. And mostly, I think, during our Ask an Atheist events when we were first starting, that's when we saw the most people who were not for us being out in the public forum, and people coming up and being a little bit confrontational. But even then, it wasn't too bad. None of us felt overly threatened or anything.
So it's actually something interesting you just brought up there, the Ask an Atheist events. So tell me about how, I guess, you went about setting those up, how regularly you hold them, and what kind of response do you get from them?
So when we first started out, we were doing these Ask an Atheist events, and the way that it happens is Lubbock has a First Friday art trail on the first Friday of every month. And it's basically all these different art galleries, and you can go around and tour them downtown. And so we set up a booth just outside of one of them. One of them gave us permission to set up outside their gallery. And we just had a banner that said, "Curious, got questions, ask an atheist." And some of us sat behind this booth, and we just sat there. We didn't approach people. We let them come to us. But it was kind of funny. We almost caused several accidents, people trying to, take a double look at our booth. People were really surprised that we were out there. But we did get people who would just come up to us and ask questions. Most of the questions that we got were, "What is an atheist? I don't know what that is. I don't understand." But people were mostly just curious. They were really, especially young people, kids, especially middle schoolers, were really excited to have the opportunity to ask someone about their viewpoint that was different. That's not something that a lot of kids here are exposed to. They don't get to interact with people outside of their small little church community, because in a rural place like Lubbock, your church community is your entire world. You very rarely venture outside of that. And so to have the opportunity just out in the open for them to ask questions and is something very rare and special. So we didn't get a lot of hate, but we got a lot of curiosity.
So with how do you cope? And it's interesting that you mentioned that even though you've got about 300,000 people in Lubbock, that it is still, you'd consider it a rural community, I guess, because of a lot of the towns around. So I guess how do you find dealing with people who are genuinely jumping out of religion, but then also losing that community feel, or that community they've been a part of? How do you find dealing with that transition?
That's one of the most difficult things to deal with. And here, that's part of the reason a lot of people don't leave their religion, is because in a smaller area like Lubbock, your community is everything. It is your support system. It's how you get through grief. It's how you get through hard times financially. You can't rely on anything else. There's not a lot of help here in Texas. There's not a lot of government assistance. So you have to rely on these communities. And in a place like Lubbock, the church is your community. So leaving it can be incredibly difficult. You won't have another support system. So that's one of the things that we have found to be incredibly important to building community, is to create a new support system that services our members' needs. So we do things like, we have a relief fund where people, if they're falling on hard times and they're a member of the atheist community, they can ask us for some financial assistance, and we have that available for them. And we find the different things that people are needing to be able to leave their religious community, and that's what we try to provide. So we just are trying to fill the needs that they will have once they have left.
And from the sounds of it, it sounds like it must be a fairly intense and almost full-on job, especially running it. What kind of, I guess, support systems and structures have you got in place in the actual management side of ACL?
So right now, we're mostly running everything off of spreadsheets, but we're going to be moving our data management to something a little bit more all-inclusive, because it has grown really fast. We didn't expect it to grow this fast. We've only been a nonprofit for about a year. So we're going to be moving our data management this year, and right now we're doing research on the different platforms to do that with. Wix has been who we go through to run our website, and that has been a really amazing resource that was very affordable for us. But structurally, the thing that has helped us the most was having a functional board of directors and figuring out how to give everybody different jobs and different expertises. And so we use the American Atheist system for that. And they have a system called ACEs, where they break up the different activities. And so ACES stands for activism, community, education, and social. And so we broke up all of our different activities into those 4 categories, and each one of our directors kind of took one of those, and they manage that. And so that has really helped to have that small group of people who are dedicated to making that happen. And it breaks up the work so that it's not so intensive for any one person.
Okay. So as far as activism goes within your community, how successful, I guess, what are some of the successes and some of the failures that I guess that you've seen as far as, I guess, positive change for local atheists?
So the most positive change I can say is that we are now welcome into a lot of the local government areas. So like we can give the invocation, for instance, and they actually changed their policy to no longer be that just religious leaders can give the invocation, but anybody can call in and request. So anybody from any kind of group can call in and request. And so they're more inclusive now because we got involved, and we were, I think, the first non-Christian group, even not just an atheist, but the first non-Christian group to give the invocation at Lubbock City Council. And now because of us, there are lots of other different kinds of groups that are requesting to give the invocation. So it's been a really positive change for us. And then also, you know, we are more seen by the local government. I'm on the community engagement task force for the city of Lubbock. And so, and that's a task force that tries to combat discrimination and racism, and tries to reach out to other minority groups here in Lubbock. And so being able to be seen and heard and taken seriously has been one of the biggest things that we could have hoped for just us being active for the last year. Now, statewide, there are some things that are concerning for us that we're going to be fighting for coming up. I don't know if you know, but in Texas last year, there was a bill that tried to get passed that would essentially allow anybody who is licensed by the state to use their religion to discriminate and not provide services. So that would include anybody licensed by the state, which would barbers and doctors and real estate agents. Anybody who would be licensed by the state could use their religion to discriminate. And so even though that didn't get all the way through the Texas legislation last year, and this year we have our legislature's not in session, 2021, that will definitely be something coming up. And so we're focusing a lot more on state legislation in the next 2 years. But luckily, we have been so successful in building our community that we have a group of volunteers now that is very dedicated to helping us be more active. And it's made our activism that much more potent because we spent the time building community.
And I guess, and pardon the term, but it sounds as though in London in particular, you are fairly blessed as far as having a fairly open and understanding community that has accepted you. Some of the other communities around you, where are you seeing challenges for atheists, I guess, in your part of Texas?
So most of the challenges that we see are coming from some of the smaller communities, and that's to be expected. Some of the smaller towns that only have maybe a few thousand people in them are definitely harder for atheists to come out. And so I think even though that we have been, like you said, fairly blessed, it's not been really by accident because we were very strategic in the way that we presented ourselves when we first started coming out. We were very aware of the fact of what has not been working for other people around the US, and that coming out as aggressive or coming out and doing something like, if we were to have done the invocation in the same style as, like, say, the Satanists and made a mockery of it and a joke of it, we probably would not have had the same reception. So part of the reason that we've had such a warm reception is because we've been very strategic in the way that we word our message, and the way that we engage with the community is so human and so positive that it's almost impossible to not like us. And so, but we have thought very long and hard about how to message to the Lubbock community to avoid some of those pitfalls that we have seen some of the other groups around the U.S. Fall into.
So when you say pitfalls, can you give me, I guess, a couple of examples, and I guess for things that other groups and other potential startup communities should avoid doing? You mentioned obviously coming out in an aggressive manner, similar to the Satanic Temple. And obviously different things will work in different towns. But
right.
What advice, or what would you say is a big don't do?
So I feel like the Satanic Temple and coming out aggressively, those definitely are not. It's not that they're useless or not that we shouldn't do those anytime, but those are I feel like those tactics are great for the big national stage. But when it comes to building a community in a town and if you really want to connect with your local government, with your local city, you have to message yourself in a way that says, I'm a part of this community. I am part of Lubbock. I am your neighbor, and I want to be involved with you. I care about you, and I want to help you. So one of the biggest don't do's is don't separate yourself. Don't separate your atheist community and say it's us against everybody else. That's something that I think a lot of atheists fall into, is they want to separate themselves. Is a lot of atheists feel resentment towards religion or resentment towards our local community that may have ostracized them. We've seen that a lot here. Is a lot of our members are ostracized. They've lost friends, they've lost family, they've lost their community. They don't want to come out and be nice and play nice. But as a leader, if you're going to be a leader of one of these groups, if you're going to try and create a community, you yourself cannot let those emotions cloud your judgment on how to run a community. You have to make people in your town aware that you're there to work with them and not against them, and that you're a part of their community, and you really just want the same respect that they give everybody else.
Okay. So something that, you mentioned it earlier, and Chris actually put it up in the chat, and I did mean to ask you about it a bit earlier, so I'm jumping back a little bit. The no strings attached outreach. Mm-hmm. What was the thought behind that? And obviously, it's I guess with the name behind it as well. If you could sort of, I guess I've got a bit of an idea, but if you can maybe expand on it a little bit.
Yeah, so the way it came about is we actually have a little story behind it. So when we first started doing community outreach, we knew that we wanted to go out and help the community. That was always something we wanted to do. So we started doing volunteer work for other organizations first. That's the first thing that we tried to do. We went and fed the homeless at a homeless shelter. And we raised money for Women's Protective Services and donated a lot of things to them. And one of the last things that we had tried to do was Lubbock Impact is a local church that gives out a free meal to the homeless population, or to low-income people as well. And they had put out a call to all the different organizations in Lubbock that 4 or 5 of the groups who had volunteered for that night had just suddenly canceled, and they needed volunteers really badly. And one of our members had heard about it, and so we went, and we were wearing our Atheist Community of Lubbock shirts, which it's really just a plain colored shirt with a little logo right here. This is Atheist Community of Lubbock. And so I went and I started to volunteer, and I was organizing things. And then as people started to come in, right before they did, one of the leaders got up and told everybody, hey, make sure you're not setting the food out on the table yet, because we're going to give a sermon beforehand, and we don't want them to eat until they've listened to the sermon, because if you put the food on the table, they won't listen. Wow. And that really got to me. That really hurt when I heard that. But I was still there to help. I was still there to volunteer. So I tried to play nice. And right as they let everybody in, one of the pastors came up to me and told me that I needed to leave because I had the little logo on my shirt that said Atheist Community of Lubbock. And their primary mission was to bring people to Jesus. and that I would confuse people if they knew that atheists could do this kind of thing as well. So I left, or I was kicked out. And it was after that we decided, you know what, it's enough of trying to volunteer for these other organizations. We need to create a program for ourselves that doesn't put these strings on people, that doesn't require them to sit through a sermon, that doesn't require them to, to jump through any hoops in order to get services. And we're going to serve people, the people of Lubbock, with whether they're atheist or religious or whatever kind of background they come from. We just want to help people. And so that's where the no strings attached came from, was just this idea that, you should be able to receive assistance no matter who you are, just because it's the right thing to do.
So I guess that that probably says a lot more about that church than anything. I mean, that's horrible. That's really genuinely, I normally sort of say to, when it comes to religious groups who are performing a charitable act, I mightn't agree with what they're preaching, but hey, they're doing some good here, and we'll leave them in peace. But that's just horrible. That's actually taking a good act and turning it into something that's deceptive, and asking you to come in and help and then kicking you out. So getting you to work for them. I think that's is that church still operating with that sort of? How are they, or have you kind of, I guess, have you taken the market from them, so to speak?
They are still operating, and they do serve a lot of people, but they did lose some funding, and some of our members actually regularly gave to Lubbock Impact because of the work that they do. And so they did lose some funding. Some of the people from the Unitarian Universalists, they're kind of a partner of ours. They also really didn't like that, kicking somebody out who's trying to help. They didn't like the withholding services so that before you could eat. And so they did lose some donors, and I don't know to what extent they were donors, how much they gave, but I do know that there was a bit of backlash on that.
So you'd think they'd want the atheists in the room so they could preach to them, wouldn't you? I mean, imagine saving the head of the Atheist Convention. I mean, that'd have to be a big
they could try.
Yeah, I'm sure they could. So what about as far as larger events? Have you had any opportunity to put any larger events on? I mean, obviously, in Texas, you're quite lucky to have, I guess, a large range of very notable, celebrities in the atheist community. I guess, your Matt Dillahunty's, your Aaron Ra's. Have you managed to be able to get any of those guys to come into the community or put on a large event at all?
So I think last year or maybe 2 years ago, Aaron Ra did come out to one of our events, to our annual meeting, and he did kind of little meet and greet and had a dinner here. But we haven't really been able to do a really large event. That is something that we're going to be looking at for next year. Our largest event by far was definitely our No Strings Attached outreach. But as far as like a member event, our annual meeting this year, which we just had a couple of weeks ago, was really successful, and we had a lot of people come out. We had a few guest speakers from Texas Tech. But we haven't been able to get anybody from like a Matt Dillahunty or anybody like that to come out and do a larger event. But that is something that we're going to be looking at doing in the future.
Well, I don't know. I doubt he's watching this, but Matt, if you're watching this, and maybe you're even watching it in the future, get to Lubbock. Come on, it's only 4 hours away. And then you came to Australia, and we're the other side of the planet. So get to Lubbock. Although unfortunately for me, I wasn't quite in the atheist community when they all came out. So my loss. But so I guess we've spoken a bit about the organisation, but I guess I'd like to also talk to you about you and your journey. So have you always been an atheist, or did you start life as a Christian, or what's the Tracey story?
So I have a bit of an odd story. I didn't really grow up, I wouldn't call it Christian. My mother was Christian. I guess you could call my dad Christian too, but really I think he's just in it for the potluck. But we were in the Air Force, so we traveled a lot. So we didn't really have like a church home. That wasn't a thing for us. We didn't have a church that we regularly went to, but my mother was very religious. But for me as a kid, I guess I didn't really ever understand the whole Jesus thing. I didn't think about it very much. I always considered it something that was just in the same vein as like Spider-Man. It was just happy stories that I got told a lot. I didn't give it much more thought than that. And it wasn't until I got to be a teenager that I started asking a lot of questions, kind of realizing, oh, this is a thing that people like, this is huge for a lot of people. And so I started asking a lot of questions, and it just never really made sense. I can remember being maybe 11 years old and at a church service with a friend, and the pastor was going on about how Jesus's DNA would look completely different. It would be God DNA. And I just remember thinking, oh, this is ridiculous. This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so once I got to college, that was about it. I mean, after I had taken a few college courses and taken a philosophy course, that's fermented it for me that, okay, this is just ridiculous. This is not something I need to invest any time in, other than making sure that they don't pass any laws to discriminate or anything. That was pretty much the extent of it.
So it sounds like you're fairly, well, not so much unique, but I guess maybe in active atheism, in a lot of people who I speak to who are fairly actively involved have come from an ultra religious background, and it's almost like there's that fight back or that having seen the other side. What drew you to atheist activism in particular?
Well, at first it was just a group of people to belong to, just an easy way to make friends. But then once I started getting involved in running the community, I guess because I didn't have that background where I had to struggle and fight against religion or struggle with my identity, I had a different perspective. I didn't have that anger and resentment that a lot of people come to it with. But I did see other people struggling, and I saw the discrimination that does happen. We've had members who complain about their kids getting bullied in school because they're atheists. We've had members talk to us about having to hide their religion from their employer for fear of being fired. And we've had a lot of that discrimination. And I guess my personality, I just really want to protect other people. I'm a little bit of a mama bear in that way, I guess. And so
you're what we'd call in Australia, you're a doer.
Yeah. I really wanted to use my unique abilities and talents to be able to create a community where people felt safe and where they didn't have to struggle. And I recognized that this was something I could make a big difference in. And so I took a pretty unique approach to it, and it's worked out really well for us.
Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes before we'll wrap it up. So anyone who is in the chat, if you do have any questions, shoot them out, and we will try and get to as many as possible. I think there was about 20 odd people in the chat before, so we're not going to get inundated with questions. And these guys tend to just sit back and not ask questions, but really, sort of they do engage a lot. But it's hard to get questions out of some of these people. So we'll see how we go. So I guess if people want to get involved with, I guess first of all we'll start with Lubbock. If there's someone in Lubbock or one of the surrounding towns, how can they get in touch? How can they get involved with the ACL?
Well, getting involved with us is fairly easy. We have a website. It's called atheistoflbk.com, and all of our events are online there, and so they can reach out that way. We do have a Facebook group and a Facebook page. It's everything on all of our social media is under Atheists of LBK. And so it's fairly easy to find us. You can also contact me directly. My email is tbenefield@atheist.org.
Yep. So I guess outside of Lubbock, anyone who does want to get involved with American Atheists, is it just a matter of having a look on the website, or?
So it depends on how you want to get involved. If you'd like to be an assistant state director or a state director in your state, what I would do is go onto the American Atheist website and first of all look to see who's already in there. There's a list of all of the directors on American Atheist website. So if there's already somebody in your state, then definitely reach out to them and see how you can get involved. But there are a lot of states that don't yet have directors. And so getting on there and if there's not anybody, then you can reach out to our national field director. Her name is Samantha McGuire. And she's really amazing. And so you can either reach out to me and I can help put you in touch with her, or you can reach out to your state director if you have one. And her information is on the website as well. And she can help get you a lot of resources to build up your community.
So as far as I guess Lubbock, obviously there is a Christian, a large Christian community. Are there any other religions, or that have a reasonable sized population in Lubbock, or what's the demographic?
So we actually have a lot of people from Turkey here in Lubbock. We get a lot of international students because of Texas Tech. So we have the Muslim community is fairly large here, is the same with the Jewish community, the Buddhist community. There's a fairly diverse culture here in Lubbock, and the interfaith community is fairly large. So it's doesn't compare anywhere near to the Christian community, but there is a lot of representation here from different faiths.
And do you find many of those people who are coming into, I guess, your community, or is it, I guess, predominantly, I would imagine it's Christian, but what reaction are you getting from people within those communities? I guess, especially if people are coming out from somewhere like Turkey, where it's not as easy to be an atheist in Turkey as I guess it would be in the United States. What interactions are you having with those people?
So we actually have a few members that are from Turkey, and then we are part of the interfaith community as well. And so a lot of those smaller religious communities have been extremely welcoming to us, because we're more willing than maybe they are to put ourselves out there and to make news and to go onto the news and to make headlines. And so we're making things more inclusive for everybody. And I think that because we're doing that, we've had a lot of support from some of these smaller religious communities.
And do you have an outreach at Texas Tech itself, or I guess, or an alliance with?
We are working on it. That's one of the things. That's one of our goals this year, is to start some secular student alliances at both Texas Tech and some of the high schools and middle schools here in town. And
just for those who are looking in the chat, don't forget the after party is on Jen's Little Corners channel. Definitely worth it. Always interesting. Lots of nerdy chat and a little bit of science stuff gets thrown in there, and always a fairly relaxed one. It's always interesting to see who comes in. So I would encourage everyone. The link is there. Make sure you do come and have a look. And Chris is back with us.
I'm back. Hello, everybody. That makes it awesome. It makes it so easy to run the show and keep up with things. And while y'all are talking, I'm spreading links on social media, and I'm doing all these things. It makes it so much easier. Thank you very much, Chris, for taking over.
Get to do all the fun stuff in the background.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now I need to find somebody that can do the fun stuff in the background so I can go in the other room and just watch the show.
Well, that's what we call life goals, isn't it?
Wow,
hey,
super genius. She doesn't have a YouTube channel yet, so in the future they may put up a YouTube channel. There's a lot of us in the community who are willing to help. We've got a lot of talent out here. MathPig is a Discord expert, and he'll help you set up a Discord for your community and probably even show you how to use it if you don't know how to use it. It's a very powerful tool that I don't know how to use. So if you want to look into those areas, get with us, and we can maybe put you with people, or we'll bring it up on the show and we'll go, hey, the American Atheist Miss Tracey here wants some help doing a thing, and we'll get you some help or some guidance.
That'd be fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so for those who are watching, if you don't mind, she doesn't have a channel, so I can't go shill her channel. But feel free to look her up on social media. If you have questions or you want to get involved, send her, and you're in the Lubbock area. One thing you were talking about earlier, I just wanted to point out that to him it seems odd that Lubbock would be 200,000 and you're talking about it as rural. But, Lubbock is very flat and very spread out. So even though there's a lot of them, they're very spread out. And that's like farmers. It's all farm country around there. So that's part of the reason why, even though it does seem like a lot of people, it is still kind of...
It's very rural. It's unique. Like I was saying in the beginning, we have some aspects of it that are big city, but it's not impossible to be at the 7-Eleven and see a horse ride up. It might happen. So we're still very rural.
Okay.
Gotcha.
It's funny. It's funny you say that because I actually live in a town of about 250,000. Although it's depending on who you ask and what parts of the local area you add in, and we're a university town here as well. So it's funny. There's a lot of parallels. So I'm listening and I'm hearing and I'm thinking, there's some things that could work where I am. So I've certainly I promise you I'm going to steal a lot of your ideas and probably send you a few messages and say, what am I doing wrong when it doesn't work? But no, look, I think it's important. And one thing, I think there's a lot of heroes out there in the community who are doing things for the right reasons. And like you said, that the no strings attached, you're not doing it because, you're trying to deconvert everyone or drag them over. You're just doing it because you want to be in the community and for the community. Which I think it's in the community and for the community. I think it's two very important things that do need to be intertwined. And I guess I just want to say, even though I'm not in your community, I want to thank you for the work that you're doing, because I think it's so important that that people in our community are out there and are out there doing it for the right reason. I liked what you had to say about not being angry and out there, because I know that I think for a lot of us, when we deconvert, we all go through our angry atheist phase where we want to go and yell at everyone, and your religion that I was following 2 weeks ago is stupid, and how could you believe? So it's good that to reinforce that, I guess. So look, I guess on behalf of the community here, thank you for the work you're doing, and I'd love to get you back on at some point, or maybe on my channel or back on here for another chat, and I guess follow up and see how things are going in Lubbock, because it sounds like you're at a point where you've got a really good foundation set up, and especially with 40% of people identifying as non-religious. That's in the US, that is an anomaly.
Well, one of the things, if you don't mind, she's her thing about helping people when they need to, building community and all that too. But whenever there's an atheist out there who's uncomfortable or needs an outlet or a place to go or people to talk to, she's that person. That's exactly what you're doing, Chris. That's his whole mission, from my understanding, is about getting out there, Chris, the atheist pastor, getting out there and helping those people who are in a place and want to be able to come out and need a place to do it safely. So I think that's very good that you guys
I try to, and I'm learning, and that's why I like having conversations like this, so I can steal all those ideas.
I think it's so important to, because you have to recognize that there are going to be those people who have resentment and anger when they come out as an atheist, and so if you're trying to build community and trying to do these things out in the community to help, it's important to also provide that space where people can be angry and not let that taint or affect the persona that you've crafted for your public facing community. There's two different faces that our community has. There's public facing and then there's inward, because we have to allow for that anger to be expressed, and there's just no other way to build a relationship with your members. You have to allow them that freedom to do that in order to build trust.
And probably better to have that anger behind closed doors rather than in the community's face. So
all right. Well, thank you guys. If you don't mind, if you're not subscribed to my channel, everybody, subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to Atheist Pastor. He's wonderful. And as soon as Tracey gets a channel,
absolutely,
we will shill Tracey's channel. So give them all some love. Show them some love. Thank you both for this evening, for you, Chris, this morning for you. Thank you for joining us. It's been wonderful.
Well, technically it is the morning. It's almost, it's just gone 1 a.m. here, so it's definitely the morning. Definitely the morning. But fortunately, I don't like sleeping apparently. So
apparently not. Here we are. All right. Well, thank you. You guys have a great day. Go hang out at Jen's little corner.
Yes. Don't forget Jen.
Thanks.
Y'all take care. Have a great day.
See you.
Bye.